All right, so this what I'm looking at right here is the Google Doc that I sent last week in the Slack channel. And is it still sharing? All right, here we go. And I've added a little bit to it that might be helpful for you. So here I actually put 2 example projects. These examples are more for looking at what a README is supposed to look like. So the project was a little bit different. So these are old projects from about a year ago. Yeah, about a year ago. And so the project was quite different. So don't worry too much about that. I mean, feel free to take a look at what they were doing. It is a little bit more complicated because they were SQL at that time was a requirement, but it is no longer. So feel free to look into it. But this is more for like, all right, what sort of information should be in your README? And these are just like examples because I feel like for someone's first time writing a README, it can get pretty like you don't even know where to begin. I will be doing one of these office hours to talk about READMEs, but just wanted to put these couple of examples here. If you're like really struggling with like where to even begin with like asking questions in the project, feel free to like use this as a little bit of inspiration. So these are actually my students from a year ago. I know one of them works at Bloomberg now, which is awesome. Someone else works for, I think, did they do a project on the chess company or works for a chess company? I don't remember, but yeah. So these are definitely examples that you can look into.
Yish, I'm not seeing any codes being on the README. So it's not like the normal README that we have on the LearnCo?
No, very, very different. So learn codes, READMEs are really just like, you know, so at first glance you can just see the code, but in a normal project, READMEs are really just like an explanation of what the project is. So imagine you're you're a recruiter and you're just like taking a look at candidates' projects. This is the first thing you want to see. So you want it to be very, very clear as to like what's going on, what this project is about, just like think of it as like an executive summary of your project.
Yeah, I was under the impression that it is, I mean, the same document which we are going to write the code on, right, is going to get, I mean, in that, like all the markdowns will become the README and you just need to save it.
Yeah, no. So a README is actually something that you have to write on your own as well, on top of doing the project. So yeah, I'm really glad that I actually cleared that up today then. README is something that most people write at the end of the project when they're finished with their project. So yeah, this is just the kind of stuff. There are many, many different ways to go about writing README, and I'll go into more detail maybe next on Monday, just because like a README is not something they have to worry about now. I'd rather talk about data cleaning and preparing a data science presentation. So those will be the things I'll be talking about today. I'll be talking about cleaning, and then on Thursday I'll talk about data science presentations and how like they're structured and what's good info to have, what's not good info to have. Okay. Any questions regarding anything so far?
So that this is updated on the same document, so we can.
I'll post the link again right after this. But yeah, I put a couple pointers here in terms of data cleaning, but happy to like add to it. I think you all have edit access to it, so if anyone wants to add notes, feel free. Or like add comments or like tag me for help on something if you need clarification, so feel free to do that. But basically for data cleaning, let's start with the big picture. I strongly advise that like whenever you're done doing your data cleaning, that you save your clean tables. You save your clean data frames either as CSVs again, or to SQL tables. I know some people talk to me about like wanting to incorporate SQL into their projects. So I've linked the documentation for Pandas 2 SQL. That basically how Pandas 2 SQL works is that what you do, it's kind of a 2-step process. One, you have to import this thing called create engine, and that's basically what helps create the SQL database. Here in Create Engine, here you basically give it your SQL database file name. And then after that, if you have a data frame, all you have to do is do df.toSQL, feed it in the table name, and it's in your database. There's a lot of the documentation here. I think it's clear, but if anyone needs any help, please just like send a message to the Slack channel. I'm happy to send like actual code that I've used. But I think it'd be good for you guys to figure out as well if you want to do SQL, but you do not have to.
So how does that happen? So now data frame has the column and the row, right? So in SQL, there are like multiple multiple sections, right? Where right, the columns and rows can be different, or maybe like one column is into different rows. So when it gets converted, how does it get converted? It just gets as a row, and
it will take the column names, and those will be whatever the column names are in your table will be the column names for your SQL table. And because in a database you can have multiple tables, I think that's what a lot of people use this for. It lets you store multiple tables in a database file. So if you want to do multiple tables, you just do it for each data frame. All you have to do is just give it a different table name. Oops, is this too big? No, this is fine. Yeah. So when you do df.toSQL, so the data frame .toSQL, give it the table name and just feed it the connection.
So here, can we write multiple file names and go about, or we have to write separate code for each one? So let's say
each table, you have to do this step separately. I don't recommend that you do this in a loop because I mean I don't think y'all will have more than like 10 tables. So I recommend just to like so that you don't run into errors. Because one kind of irritating thing is it's very hard to edit SQL tables. So usually, let's say you like mistakenly df.toSQL like an unfinished, an unclean table. If you want to clean it or like, yeah, if you want to edit something in a table, you actually have to drop the entire table and then redo the toSQL. That's actually the fastest way to do it. Which is a little bit finicky, not too hard. You just delete you have to just do like a drop table command, but yeah, highly recommend that you just do it one at a time and make sure that you're like absolutely certain that these are the tables that you want to use. Did that help?
Yeah.
I don't expect, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask you there's different questions, so let me finish up.
All right. Was it anyone had any more like data frame toSQL questions? Yeah, I just wanted to say that you're not expected to use this. I know just like some people wanted more practice with SQL because, as I mentioned, we probably will not come back to SQL in the rest of the course unless you decide to incorporate it into one of your projects. It doesn't even have to be this project. It could be one of the future projects as well. If like there's just too much going on right now, which I totally understand. All right.
I was just going to ask, what do you think about like, how bad of an idea is it to combine different sources of so you want to combine like Box Office Mojo with IMDb or whatever? I don't know, use like the movie titles. Would that just create a huge headache, or would that actually work? Like with Harry Potter and then Deathly Hallows, one would be colon, one would be like, quote, I don't know.
Yeah, so actually that's one of the things that I put on. That's one of the things that I put on this sheet that I wanted, that I actually wanted to touch on which is basically look for unique identifiers, such as like the IMDb IDs, not movie titles. Just because, as you mentioned with like Harry Potter, extremely inconsistent with the way that different databases input their title differently. So I do not recommend joining on a movie title unless you're sure that they input the title the same way. So I think yeah.
But like, what if there is no IMDb? Like, at the table does not have an ID of IMDb. It's like, then you just really can't join those. It's like
something that I kind of forgot to mention, which I'm gonna put here, is that you don't have to use every table provided. I'm just gonna put that there. So you don't have to use every single table. I know like half the tables come from IMDb, and so those you can join pretty easily, I think. Because they have that unique ID that starts with a double T and then some number. So those IDs are there because one, you can join the IMDb tables together, and also I believe either TMDB or OMDB lets you search by that ID. So I believe like the tables that were given, the numbers one doesn't have an ID. I believe the Box Office Mojo also doesn't have these IMDb IDs. So like, yeah, unfortunately, with those tables that don't have any unique identifiers to join together, you unfortunately cannot join those tables together. And I think it's fair for this project to say that, like, you know, it's a limitation of the data. If you weren't able to use some data, or if you're using like different subsets of data, you can totally say that it's due to a limitation of the data that you were given. You can totally assume that, you know, you can't get additional information if you don't want to. You can definitely just mention that as like a limitation in while you're working on your notebooks.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
So what if we like right from each data that we have, we pull in two or three columns from each data, right? And save it separately, and then because like there are a lot of data which is incomplete and inconsistent, right? So
Yeah.
if we are able to pull those complete data and then create one whole new set of data with matching details, like for example, like let's say Harry Potter. So wherever Harry Potter is mentioned, we just change everything to just a single name in the data that we have created, right? And then merge them together with some indexing or things like that. Then
Yeah, I mean, you can do that only if each of your smaller tables has something that lets you merge them cleanly. Does that make sense? So let's say you have like a table for genres, you have a table for movie budgets, you have a table for movie like popularity scores. You need to have some sort of unique number or ID. In this case, I think most likely you guys will be using the IMDb ID to join them on. If not, how would you know from one table this is Harry Potter like episode 7 and then this is Harry Potter episode 7, but their titles are just inconsistent? You won't be able to join them. Does that make sense?
okay.
Yeah. So unfortunately, yeah, limitation of the data set, which is why we give you the option to use APIs or Scrape. So yeah, I also wanted to mention, like, I guess a strategy that most students found to be most useful when doing the data cleaning process, especially when you're working with other people. I found that like students who actually split the work and take like half of the students take like maybe all the IMDb tables, because I think there's like 5 or 6 IMDb tables and the rest are other data sources. If you first have a discussion about, all right, how are we going to go about this cleaning process, maybe sit down and look at all the columns from all the tables together and come up with like a rough plan of like, all right, I'm going to clean this, I'm going to do this to these tables and this to these tables. Split the work, you can go your separate ways for a few days and then come back with both sides clean. That has been what, in my experience, what most students end up doing and like is the most time efficient. And when we're going through the review, because I will be asking you about how you went about doing your work, you don't have to talk about the stuff that you didn't do. So let's say you're worried about like, yeah, if my partner is doing all of this cleaning, I won't be able to explain it. Don't worry about that, because I will ask you which parts you did work on, and you will only be reviewed on those sections. Yeah, that helps, like, I guess, lessen the workload for each person. And also I understand everyone has different schedules. It's near impossible to be like constantly on a call working on things together. But yeah, for this session, it's really more of like a Q&A if anyone has any questions about, you know, the project process. Each one is only going to be me talking about like little things here and there. But yeah, as I mentioned, I really am glad to see like you guys helping each other out on the Slack channel. I hope to see more of that. Yeah. So does anyone have anything that's going on? Which is also no pressure, because if there are no questions, we can also end and then y'all can work on the project. Has everybody at least like opened up the data files to see like what the tables look like?
Yeah, that seems to be a good idea. We should just parallelly start working for.
Yeah, I think I would start with the IMDb tables just because they are all from the same data. They're all from the same data source. So they all have like the IDs that are pretty clear on like what to join on. I will say, I don't know if anyone's noticed, but like this data set is kind of old. It is, I think, like mid 2019. I mean, I guess that's not super old, but yeah, just keep that in mind when you're doing your analysis. I think it's also good to, I will say this later when I talk about the presentation, but like setting up the context of your analysis is important as well. So think about that.
So how similar do you think we'll find the answers to across the databases? Like if we find like this genre is really popular in this database, do you think it'll be a similar answer in another database, or are they pretty?
I can actually say that like over so this project, or like some variation of this project, has been as a part of the curriculum for about a little bit over a year, and no two projects have been the same. So sometimes you have similar like insights as to like, yeah, we all know like these action superhero movies are doing super well, so those are like a pretty common what's the word, actionable, what's the word, suggestion. I'm blanking on the word right now. But anyways, that's a very common insight that people come up with. But there's nothing wrong with that, you know? Like my main point is not that you come up with some like groundbreaking advice for Microsoft. It's more that like, you know, you were able to take data and come up with something. It's more, for me, it's more about that process and like the data cleaning, the visualizations, of course. But yeah, I think because only at least in like the classes that I've taught, this is the first class that I've taught that scraping and doing APIs is not a requirement. So maybe what you'll see is more common, I guess, within each other, like amongst yourselves, amongst this class is going to be very similar. But I don't know. I feel like I've already seen like a couple like test questions and they've been pretty different so far. Let's see. Did anyone have any like specific data cleaning questions, or are we not there yet?
I'm actually not there yet, so.
All good.
Yesterday I was going to sit, but they could not make it. So, but I guess right this week, I mean, it should be. I should at least like get all the, and at least the IMDb data right into the file, and then like once I know that what are the rows and columns which are fully there, then I may have a few questions, because I mean pulling now, at least I know that okay, like I can pull the data, at least the CSV files. So
Yeah.
API, since I've not pulled in so far, so I cannot say anything about it.
Yeah, and like as I mentioned, you don't have to use API calls at all. Like that's really not a requirement, and you can totally do a full comprehensive analysis just using the data that was provided. Granted, a little bit dated, but it's fine. Yeah, I've seen many projects just using the. I've seen many projects that are just using like the data provided, and it's, yeah, they're solid. So no worries. If you don't, I feel like for some people, like figuring out an API is a lot right now. And the thing is, in future projects, you definitely have the opportunity to use an API or scrape. In all of your future projects, you have that option. So definitely don't have to worry about doing that for this.
So, I mean, in one of the calls, I was sitting with where the presentations were happening, right? And one girl actually presented the entire process, like the README, which I'm seeing now. This was actually there on the presentation. If there is this README and then right exactly the same or similar thing, it's on the PowerPoint presentation. That should be fine, right?
Yeah. So actually, a lot of people's READMEs and PowerPoint presentations overlap a lot. Well, I will suggest not just like taking your PowerPoint and like putting them as images on your README. The information that's in your PowerPoint is going to be very, very similar as to on your README. I will say maybe your README will be slightly more technical, but I will talk about that next week, I think.
And all this, I mean, the images which are there on the README, I mean, they are not coded. They're just like the PNG files which has been just put.
So for example, let's see, for this one, for example, these are all screenshots. Pretty sure these are screenshots that they just like, I'll send out like how to do this in a markdown and how to like embed images and how to like make, I don't know, like hyperlinks or like these different headers. I'll send out a resource when I talk about markdowns next week.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah. But I would say don't worry about that. Like I think that this week should really be focused on the data cleaning, and if you're done with the data cleaning or APIs or scraping, and if you're done with data cleaning, I would say like I would prioritize doing more of the data visualizations before figuring out like the README and the PowerPoint, because those are really like the last things that you do right before you present.
So by Sunday, right, we should be ready with the cleaning part, right? Fully.
Yeah. My like
timeline,
my recommendation is to be done with cleaning by the end of this week. Usually like the halfway mark is when cleaning should be done.
So, okay, so by Wednesday, like when we meet next, there should be at least some part of the cleaning done.
On Thursday, yeah.
Thursday.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, and just a reminder, we will be presenting these projects as a class. I mean, each of you will be presenting your projects. If it's in a pair, you guys will present together. But we will be presenting at this time in 2 weeks. So please let me know if you can't make it. I guess all of you that are here should be able to make it, but for those of you who are watching the recording, for those of you who can't make it, please let me know.
A cleaning question.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a general rule of thumb or recommendation so if we have missing data that's quantitative, so we're just gonna fill it in, if the mean and the median are relatively similar, is there a rule of thumb for picking one over the other?
There really isn't. It's more of like, as long as you're able to, say one sentence about why you're doing what you're doing for each step of the cleaning process, you're fine. Especially because this is an industry that we are all not in. So whatever choices you make, as long as you can back it up, the mean and the median are very similar, so it doesn't matter which one you choose. Yeah, so I would say like when you get more specific and you end up working in some specific industry, there are rules usually. Like I know like in finance, there are like a set of rules on like how I think they like forward fill data usually. Rather than if it's like a stock, you would forward fill data. But for our purposes, because we are like right now we're like generalists, there are no I would say there are no big rules unless if you have a lot of outliers on one end and you're using a mean rather than a median, then that doesn't make as much sense. But definitely more flexibility on that front. As long as you can use one sentence to explain what you're doing and why, that's fine. Anything else? We'll see for the next minute if there are no questions, and then we can go. Anyone have any, I don't know, favorite movies? Recommendations?
To watch?
Yeah.
The other day I started watching the, not movie, but then this, what do you call it? Money Heist.
On Netflix, right?
So I thought like it was going wonderfully well, but then I had to stop in between. But like some other day, I guess I'll restart and watch it because that's.
Yeah, I heard it's. I haven't seen it either. I heard it's really good, but I'm bad at watching like dub things, and I need to concentrate to watch subtitles, and so I don't have time to do that. Ooh, something I forgot that I wanted to talk about. I see Marv is here with us, and so he knows a little bit about this. But in your data, you're gonna see very often that, like, for example, one movie can have multiple genres. For example, like, I don't know, like the Avengers can be action, adventure, and maybe you have other movies that are like crime, but also maybe romance, fantasy, I don't know. But one movie can have multiple genres, and they can, like, the number of genres that each movie can have isn't consistent. And so you have to think about how you want to deal with that kind of data. Like, very often, if you put that into a data frame, you would end up with something that's like, you know, you have your movie, you have like all your like movie attributes, but then you would have something that's like nested in a list. Like maybe nested, you might have like a list of genres rather than, you know, each genre in its own column. And so that's actually one of the most common data cleaning advanced functions that people end up having to write. And so I think that for this project, if you write a function that can clean that up in the way that you want to clean it, I'll be very impressed. Let me see. I'm gonna use one of like Marv's screenshots if he doesn't mind to just like talk about what I mean. Let me see if I can get this up here. Do we see this? So what's happening here is that we have, this is like, imagine that this was a bigger data frame, but these are different production companies. And in each cell is a list of production companies. And so you would basically have to think about what's the best way to break that out and have, like, you know, each cell only containing one thing. I think for the sake of, you know, you guys not thinking too hard and like doing something completely different, when we have something like this, what we end up doing is something called dummy variables. Anyone heard of the term dummy variables? All right, so imagine, let's work with genres, because I think genres is easiest to think about. So let's say there are 10 unique genres. You have like action, adventure, crime, drama, whatever. You have 10 unique genres. And the ideal way we want to have this data frame, just because you have this like one-to-many relationship, is you want each genre to be a column in your data frame. So each genre will be a column. And then to indicate like which genre is associated with which movies, you're just going to fill up this data frame with ones and zeros. So for each movie, if it's action, you'll see a 1. If it's not adventure, you'll see a 0 under adventure. Does that make sense? That was something I was trying to pull up an example of earlier, but I forgot to. Let me see if I can pull something up.
Maybe a kind of related question, but my thought was to leave it together because you don't know if it's action adventure, the combination that's what's causing it to be, for example, popular or have a high, I don't know, revenue or ticket sales box office.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, this is kind of like an up to you thing. When we get to mod 2, by doing this, you can still account for both action and adventure together. But we're not going to talk about that now. But yeah, if you want to leave it and also just do your analysis on like the combination of genres that is the most like, I don't know, profitable, for example, you can definitely have that as well. But yeah, let me just pull up this random example from Wikipedia of what dummy variables look like. Here we go. So this is kind of what I mean. Zoom in. So imagine that each of these, like 989, all of these, imagine this is your index column and each of these is a movie. And each of these would be like a genre. So then you'll be able to account for, each movie having multiple genres. So that's like the typical way that we deal with like one thing having multiple categories, that it's like not mutually exclusive. So yeah, I think very likely most groups will end up writing a function that turns like something from a nested list to something like this. So yeah, just letting y'all know that that might be coming. That might be in your future, but it will be a function that you use over and over again, because a lot of projects have this kind of relationships in their data. Cool. Any questions about that? I know that was like kind of vague, but I kind of want to do that on purpose because I think like everyone needs to be able to figure out how to write this function on their own.
So how many of projects, like what is the kind of ratio where like they focus on genres and then give the recommendations?
What was your question?
So let's say, most of the projects, right, when they give their presentation, is it based on most of the times either genre or the profitability only?
I think like genre and profitability are some of the most obvious ones. So because of that, yes, I think most of your projects will explore some form of something around profitability, because that's what, you want Microsoft to make money. So you will talk about profitability, and because like when you think about movies, you think about types of movies, and most naturally people go to genres. So because of that, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if everyone talks about genres in some form.
So if a table is made, like which says movie, genres, and then there is an additional section of profitability of that particular movie.
Mm-hmm.
So that table, if that table is able to explain that, okay, why, what is the relationship between each of the genre and then profitability, right? Is that sufficient for the presentation part?
Well, I mean, if for the presentation, you want to be able to make some sort of visualization, and as long as you can make a meaningful visualization, like a bar graph or like maybe a line graph, depending on what you're looking at, then yeah, for sure, definitely, that would be sufficient.
Yeah.
But I think for this week, just focus on the data cleaning. I think in or before your data cleaning process, definitely like look at the data first, like do like a df.info on like everything, and it'll give you an idea of where to start, I think. Because that's how you find out what columns there are, what kind of data exists in the data sets. And then from there, I think formulating your questions will be a little bit easier rather than going in blind. And also, as you're cleaning your data, you'll figure out like, okay, maybe I don't want to drop so many of these rows because I don't want to lose this data. So I think having a sense of what your data is before you even start cleaning is very important. So definitely, as first step, I would say just like take a look at all the columns, know what you have. Maybe at first glance you know for sure, okay, I don't want to touch this table. You don't have to use it. So yeah, I think this is going to be a very frustrating process for a lot of you. Know that is 100% normal. I think I mentioned to a few of you, like I had a major breakdown when I was doing my Mod 1 project because I thought I was going to fail, but I didn't. And so, yeah, I think definitely going to be challenging, but I believe that you guys can do it.
Thanks for the belief.
It's part of my job. All right. Any last questions? If not, we can knock off. And anything else, feel free to just like put messages on the Slack channel. I think that's really the best place because, you know, I see that you guys already have started answering each other's questions, which is all I wanted. So that's awesome. Keep up the daily stand-ups. I think especially as we're working on the project, the stand-ups are going to be more and more useful because, you know, you sort of see, I mean, it's not really to compare yourself with other people, but also just you know, it's like a sort of like an accountability. And if you see that you're working on something similar as someone else, maybe you can collaborate. But yeah, all right. I think there are no other questions. Going once, going twice. All right then. In that case, let's I'll see you all at your one-on-ones, and also we'll come back on Thursday, and on Thursday I'll talk about putting together a data science presentation, and that will maybe help with your project process as well. All right. Have a good night, everybody. Don't get too stressed out. Message me if there are any problems. All right. Bye, guys.